That's after Rosemary Butcher's dance makers have touched the earth of an empty warehouse in an evocation of rites and ritual.
Touch the Earth is a four-way collaboration between choreographer Rosemary Butcher, composer Michael Nyman, sculptor Dieter Peach, and the dancers.
I work always improvisationally to begin with, although I come to a rehearsal with a very clear idea of what I'd like to see happening. But the actual movement comes from the dancers creating their own ideas, from the instructions that I give. Try to think about the speeds and changes of energy that you can make during the time from the up to the down, and also in the travelling.
It's a working method she developed after studying in New York in the early 70s. On her return to Britain, she set up her own company that prefers to perform not in theatres, but in other spaces, art galleries, the street, the countryside, or even on a beach.
She's always known what she wanted to do and was determined to do it. Never mind what the fashion was, whether people were into very energetic dance or expressionist dance. She was going to do what she was interested in, work with who she wanted, and train her company of dancers in the way that she wanted them to move.
The stage version of Touch the Earth was premiered in 1986. First to join the collaboration was the composer Michael Nyman.
I have to find a piece of material that A, I can work with, and that B, is suitable for the piece, and C, is susceptible to development, extension, whatever, since almost everything I do is a kind of elaborate variation form.
His material was to come from Venice. Rosemary had just come back from a visit and had been fascinated by the vastness of the lagoon.
I came across an amazing text by Goethe where he talks about gondoliers singing at the top of their voices across the Venice lagoon.
The sound of their voices far away was extraordinary, a lament without sadness, and I was moved to tears.
As a result, he scored the piece for two women's voices and amplified violin and viola. But Goethe wasn't the only link with Venice.
One thing leads to another. Venice, who was the greatest Venetian composer, Monteverdi. So there are references to Monteverdi. Now, they're not direct quotes, although people that don't know Monteverdi particularly well might say they are direct quotes. Basically, what I've done is to take a typical Monteverdian cadence device and squeeze that into the formula of my harmony. So here we have the... and on top of that I do... sound like pure Monteverdi, but there's the kind of motions are Monteverdian, but the actual harmonies are not, and this too.
The designer was someone who had worked with Rosemary Butcher many times before, German-born sculptor Dieter Peach.
The starting point for this one was a series of works on my side, a series of works which I'd done over the years before, and they were dealing with what we would call primitive structures like tents or huts, shelters, shields, fences, and so on. And they all had as a basis a sort of rigid metal grid built in from which the form came. and the idea of these poles which were necessary to build the structures. At the same time, we didn't know about this. Rosemary had been thinking about a similar idea.
I then wanted very much to find something that would give the dance some form, and through research found a book called Touch the Earth. And this book was a collection of photographs and writings written by the American Indians at the time of their being ousted out of their lands. The photographs showed the people at work. The ones I can think of immediately are of a woman who's gathering rushes from the water, and her body's curved over, her head is very near the water. And that very shape of her going down towards the earth was very important. Well, the movement had its basis really in the photographs. I was able to, in fact, to find instructions for the movement from the images in the book, and also from the writings of the people in the book, because they were very graphic and they were very full of the feelings of the people.
The Great Spirit is our Father, but the earth is our mother. She nourishes us. That which we put onto the ground, she returns to us, and the healing plants she gives us likewise.
This is our home. We cannot live anywhere else. We were born here, and our fathers are buried here. We want this place and not any other.
I think that philosophical aspect, plus the photographs, then moved the piece on out of the original abstract basis that Dieter and I had started into the form that it eventually took.
For this television version of Touch the Earth, an empty tobacco warehouse was used as the location.
I was very excited about the space to start with because it provided me with a structure within a space. I'm talking about the columns that were sort of divided the space and gave sort of focus points on which I could then lean the sculptures which are used in the piece. That again, and they ended up as shapes like almost a wigwam shape, which again referred back to an idea we had earlier on. So for me, it was really ideal. Originally, I wanted to actually have the whole floor covered as well with some sculptural elements, maybe made with natural materials like clay, etc., etc. I then found this would have become too overwhelming and also simply quite unpractical. So the idea of the sand circle is just the reference to the earth and also to the reference of marking out a space. The other idea that came with that was that, of course, during the performance, the sand would be distorted and it would leave traces of some action which were visible.
You have to watch her dancers always in relation to each other, to the space that they're in, that you watch the spaces between them as much as you watch the dancers moving. You have to collaborate with what she's showing you. You have to be in the right frame of mind to receive what she's trying to tell you, that if you impose your expectations, the collaboration doesn't work.
Well, I think it became a very thoughtful, very contemplative piece. And I think having been and made some relationships during the piece, they're still very isolated at the end. And I think that it is both the way they're positioned and the way that the figures move that add to this feeling of loneliness or thoughtfulness. And that's really the images that we're left with at the end.
In Dance Makers next week, one of America's most popular and athletic groups, the L'Orgie Company of New York, perform two works which have taken them into the top class of modern dance groups: an interpretation of Mozart's clarinet concerto and North Star to a score by the American composer Philip Glass. That's at 7:20 next Saturday evening.